All right, let's do this one last time. My name is Sketch. I really like movies, and for the last 6 months, I've run the one, the only. Oh man, I love this movie. There are times in life when I see a movie that I really enjoy. There are times in life when I see a movie and jump over the moon, I like it so much. And then there was me seeing Into the Spider-Verse in theaters for the first time almost 2 years ago. And then 2 more times. Almost 3 more times. For me, this movie currently holds the sought-after title of most visits to the theater, and it will not be challenged anytime soon. Maybe when the sequel comes out. Marvel's Spider-Man released on the PS4 only a few months earlier. It was, for a few months, the best version of Spider-Man to come out in years. I was crazy about that game. Almost all of it. And it was the first game to really get the feel of Spider-Man right in ages, and this huge leap in the right direction was significant enough that I thought, that might be it. And maybe that was okay. I mean, could Spider-Man have his best game in years and his best movie released in the same year? To look at this properly, we need to go back a little ways. Sony's had a tough run with Spider-Man. There was the Sam Raimi trilogy, which has not aged well. I mean, I used to defend the first one. Seeing it in theaters back in 2002 as a kid who dreamed about being Spider-Man was a big deal, to say the least. And the MCU hadn't even started yet. This was when comic book movies were sort of being reborn. X-Men came out 2 years earlier, and I remember even as a kid thinking this was the first big step forward for the legitimacy of comic book movies. And I was a kid. Up until that point, mainstream comic book movies came out occasionally. I don't mean stuff like Road to Perdition or Watchmen, I mean MCU releases and really any classic comic book characters. There was usually only one every few years, and though some were standouts, most usually weren't great. But after Spider-Man, with the exception of 2006, 2009, and 2010, we've gotten a minimum of 3 per year, and that never really stopped. I guess it became clear that these were worth investing in. In fact, for the last few years, we've gotten at least 6 a year, sometimes more. The technology was finally there to make suspending disbelief easier than it had ever been. Iron Man and the MCU tend to get credit for making this happen. I really like Iron Man, and I enjoy plenty of what the MCU has to offer, but it's crazy to me that people miss the impact Spider-Man had. And it's also crazy to me how poorly it's aged. You got Willem Dafoe in Power Ranger mode, Spider-Man in clearly just a mannequin mode, the high schoolers that are clearly grown adults. I mean, I feel like I'm watching Grease. You got the whole we don't know how to make people look like they can run fast syndrome. I used to think this was a nod to Superman, but I think at the time they still just couldn't do this well. Something they solved in the MCU. And then you got this. How on earth is anyone gonna look at these and not be suspicious about how we got the photos? I mean, this has nothing to do with it aging poorly, it's just something that always really bugged me. Anyway, it's kind of silly, and for a differing collection of reasons, every iteration afterwards felt just as silly. People talk about Spider-Man 2 being a comic book masterpiece, and no, it's not. The CGI, fight choreography, and scope of New York did get a lot better, and it explored greater themes than simply learning to be a superhero and rescuing damsels in distress. But it's just too much. It constantly tries for laughs in the most momentum-breaking places, and the tone is consistently all over the place. And then we got Spider-Man 3, which has been so dissected online for the mess that it is that I don't even feel the need to comment. Then at this point, in place of Spider-Man 4, they decided to reboot the whole thing, and then that didn't go very well and got worse with its second chapter. But then, the MCU stepped in. The impossible happened. A legal rights battle. One that had its stage set years and years prior, one that could never, ever feature any sort of compromise, by some miracle came to terms. And every Spider-Man fan's wildest dreams were coming true. We got this.
Hey everyone.
And everyone went crazy. People loved him in Civil War. And I was one of them, which of course created the most insane build-up for a Spider-Man movie ever until we finally got Spider-Man Homecoming, and it was fine. It was fine. And then before you could bat an eye, a cartoon? A Spider-Man cartoon? Sure thing, Sony, I said. Sure, you got it this time, I said. This is the one, huh? You did it? And boy, did they. I love this movie. Phil Lord and Chris Miller had made such an impression on me with the Lego Movie, and have already had a pretty varied and successful number of releases. But Spider-Verse just cemented them for me as brilliant filmmakers. It's just incredible, so let's break it down. First, the visuals. When last I heard, Sony was working on patenting this animation style. It's like a living comic book. Foreground and background images are forced out of focus, halftone dots are used everywhere, they use panel cut-ups and text boxes, even the frame rate goes from smooth to choppy to create comic book feel and character. They actually cut Miles' frame rate in half for his in-training portion of the film and bring him up to speed for its conclusion. This gives him a choppy, clumsy feel at first and then a pristine feel as he gets a better grip on his abilities. This is insane attention to detail. And none of this comes off as pretentious or lame, it's just awesome. Pause the movie at any point and you've got a still that could just as easily be found in a comic book. Even the character models feel somehow right off the page. Whether things are moving fast or staying still, this is just one of the greatest treats for the eyes I've seen in years. But it goes beyond just simulating a comic book. The artful choices made throughout the whole movie are unlike almost anything I've seen. Nearly every shot, and I say that in quotes as it's all animated and no camera is actually used, but almost every shot is amazingly creative and used to amplify the energy of that section of the story. Like I said, it's animation, there is no camera. So isn't it a shame to not take advantage of the freedom that allows? This is exactly what Pixar did to such great effect, and honestly, I'm ashamed to say that I was sure we were never going to see another leap like that in what animation can do. Is comparing this to the impact of Toy Story and Pixar undeserved praise? I don't know, maybe a little bit, but that is the kind of impression it made on me, especially in 3D. Watching it home in 2 dimensions is still great, but in a world where 3D is generally just a money-making gimmick, the huge in-your-face immersion created here was incredible. But visuals aren't everything.